Is that a make
Okay.
America? Is that a make America great
Is
again?
I'm actually not sure what it is. I think is it the athletics cap?
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
I'll leave it. If it's like that, it's unclear. It's appropriately ambiguous.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Um,
Dominic, this be a great podcast to announce that you're going to be campaign director for the Trump 2024 effort. I think if you want to drop that,
Exactly.
by all means, go ahead, and I think our audience would appreciate that.
Exactly. Well, watching the news more and more, I feel like getting back in the game.
do
Well,
you? Yeah, go for it.
well, I mean, hopefully, Dominic, we're trying to get you into the game. I mean, we were having a brief conversation about San Francisco politics, and not to give away too much, we put you into contact with some SF politics people. And I was reading one of your more recent Substacks, which is sort of a cry for help to the Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley. And
Oh yeah.
if I don't, are we starting, Eric? Can we kick this
Yes,
off?
yes. This is how we start
This
podcasts
is our
here.
cold
Totally.
open, cold open. Just go right into it.
Cool. Go for
Yeah.
it.
Have you been to Silicon Valley, Dominic? Can we arrange a trip
Yeah.
for you with some local notables?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. I mean, I try and come over like once a year. I was over earlier this year. I'll definitely be over like quarter one next in 24, maybe January, February time.
Cool. Um, Great. It's perfect timing. We've just done recent episodes on, we talked about sort of, Argentina last week and sort of the rise of, the continuation of sort of more populist right or non-liberal sort of right all over the world. We've also talked about what can be done to save San Francisco. In spirit of introductions, Dominic, for people who are savvy about U.S. politics but don't know who you are, what is the best way to introduce you? Is it fair to compare the impact that Steve Bannon
Um,
had on Trump to what you had on the?
universal hate figure. Hated more than anybody in Britain is a good start. So I've run a few campaigns over the years and worked in government in various ways. But probably the two things probably which are kind of most relevant to your audience are, first of all, I ran the startup called Vote Leave, which ran the official campaign to do Brexit in 2016. And then in summer 2019, Boris Johnson called me up and said, would I kind of reassemble the team for the referendum and go into number 10 and try and take over number 10 Downing Street and sort out this kind of once in a century, at least, constitutional shit show that the establishment had got itself into over Brexit for a couple of years. Essentially how to sort that out and get the country on a new track. So I did that. And then we kind of won the election, sorted out Brexit, got it done. Then immediately within like a few weeks, obviously collided with COVID. So huge issues around that. And then the Prime Minister's girlfriend basically wanted rid of me and all of our team and wanted to replace us with all of her friends, which she persuaded the PM to do. And so we left, and then they all blew up with some help from me and the deep state.
That would be Bojo, just to cite the PM in question, just to be clear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
First, let's start with the Brexit. When you briefly share, what was the inspiration back then for it, and how does it hold up? Almost 7-8 years later.
So yeah, there were kind of sort of two different ways that we looked at it. I guess you could say sort of defensive and offensive, so to speak. So in one sense, just looking at the EU project, we thought it's massively anti-science, massively anti-technology, anti-entrepreneur. It's low growth, high debt. It's stagnant economically. Politically, you have this combination of kind of bureaucratic centralism in Brussels, which is extended in all sorts of ways and is a very dead hand on the continent. And you also have this growing crisis over immigration, obviously, and free movement being one of the basic principles. But this principle was extended to such a great extent that immigration is fundamentally completely out of control across the continent. And this was provoking various kinds of extreme backlashes. So now, of course, New York Times calls Trump and everyone that it doesn't like far right. But some of the movements that have been sparked in Europe by this genuinely are far right. Like in Austria, a third of the population voted for pretty much a Nazi party. Um, and so we basically thought that like the long-term trajectory of this whole project is bad. We should get out of it. We should insulate ourselves as much as possible from it. Also, in doing that, we'll neutralize any kind of far-right problems in Britain. If there's actually democratic control of immigration policy, then that will basically kill off the kind of growing poison of immigration debate that you can see spreading across Europe. So that was a kind of set of defensive things, and then kind of in a sort of optimistic, positive sense, we thought that if we actually kind of EU is so fundamental, like it's like responsible for, depending on how you measure it, roughly half of all British laws by 2015, 2016, and it was just killing so much of politics and policy. We thought if you get out of it, then there's just so many opportunities to do things in a different way, to do things better. I mean, one of the great ironies was that during the referendum, we said that the EU has taken over everything pretty much to do with procurement law and how the state buys things. £300 billion a year in Britain. And it's a complete disaster, and it will be a disaster in the next major crisis. And of course, as soon as we hit COVID, this was demonstrated immediately that all countries suddenly were faced with this nightmare EU process. Because we were out of it, we could actually do things like rapid testing and vaccines in a very different way. We did do it in a very different way. So much so, actually, that even the German government and the European Commission had to admit that their efforts were, quote, a total shit show, unquote. So I guess that's a sort of very kind of high-level summary. Those are the defensive reasons, and then the optimistic reasons to try and do things differently.
You mentioned the EU law thing. It reminded me of one of the viral tweets that went off at the time of Brexit, which was a guy trying to burn an EU flag. But the thing is that he couldn't light it on fire because of EU safety of materials laws that meant that the flag was inflammable material. And so he was sitting there like an idiot trying to light it, and he couldn't because of the EU laws. And it was just this sort of this amazing meme. But what I find interesting about you saying, Dominic, is that like obviously it was portrayed, as you mentioned, from the left wing as a far right, fascist sort of measure. But the way you're pitching it, it's kind of like actually we're diffusing the real far right, which is not us, which would have an overreaction to current immigration policy. And in some sense, you were kind of subverting or diffusing the far right.
Exactly, and it was it was a very interesting kind of clash of predictions as well. I remember I did interviews with people like The Economist and the Financial Times in 2015, 2016, and they all said they were absolutely convinced, and they said to me, almost beggingly, Dominic, if you succeed, you're going to turbocharge the far right in this country. They will be on a third of the vote the same way they are in Europe. It'll be a complete disaster. You are going to be responsible for this disaster, etc., etc. And we said, you guys are just have a completely bad model of reality. It's not what's going to happen at all. In fact, what will happen is once people know that there's actually democratic control of immigration policy in this country, the issue will drop from being the absolute number one priority to being a second or third order issue. And the far right here will just collapse at all the polls, and it'll vanish. And it's just very obvious what happened in the 3 years straight afterwards. Our predictions were completely correct. Their predictions were completely wrong. Now, of course, ironically, as soon as we left number 10, Boris and the Conservative establishment then essentially totally let all control of immigration go. And so now it's back as a kind of important issue. But although the Tories have completely fucked it up, it's still actually fundamentally healthier, right? Because the truth is, everyone knows who's to blame.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Real quick, what's the easiest choice you can make? Taking the window instead of the middle seat, outsourcing business tasks that you absolutely hate. What about selling with Shopify? Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Whether you're selling security systems or marketing memory modules, Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. I've used it in the past at the companies I've founded, and when we launch merch here at Turpentine, Shopify will be our go-to.
Shopify helps turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to other leading commerce platforms. And Shopify helps you sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. With Shopify Magic, whip up captivating content that converts from blog posts to product descriptions. Generate instant FAQ answers. Pick the perfect email send time. Plus, Shopify Magic is free for every Shopify seller. Businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/momentofzen. Go to shopify.com/momentofzen now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/momentofzen.
Compliance doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, with VANTA, it can be super simple. Trusted by over 5,000 fast-growing companies like Chili Piper, Patch, Gusto, and Juniper, VANTA automates the pricey, time-consuming process of prepping for SOC 2, ISO 27701, HIPAA, and more. With VANTA, you can save up to 400 hours and 85% of costs. VANTA scales with your business, helping you successfully enter new markets, land bigger deals, and earn customer loyalty. And bonus, our Moment of Zen listeners get $1,000 off VANTA. Just go to vanta.com/zen. That's VANTA.com/ZEN.
Although I think the policy that was changed after we left number 10 that's led to this huge out of control growth is wrong, I think at a deeper level, it's much better for democratic politics in Britain because everyone knows exactly who is responsible and who to blame for the policy. So I would say that that's Brexit working because there's actual clear democratic responsibility in a way which you don't have in the rest of the EU.
To the extent you're correct. I think you're also right that on the continent, right? And I think Americans tend to view the UK and Europe as the same, but as Brexit kind of demonstrate, it's actually kind of not the case. It's funny. Also, I watched that terrible Ridley Scott Napoleon movie, so I reread both of Napoleon's major biographies, and I realized how much UK policy was at variance with the continent. Going back 2 centuries, hardly new, but might be worth repeating for our American audience. But on the continent, you have seen a rise or a strengthening of the far right, actually. And so the EU country I'm a citizen of, Spain, which historically did not have a far right due to the memory of fascism until the late 70s with Franco. And it had every European, or again, when I say Europe, I mean the continent, every European country has had some form of far right. You mentioned Jörg Haider in Austria and some of the others. I think I got his name right, from the Freedom Party. And
Greece too, Golden Dawn in Greece and
right.
As well.
Right, and they've only increased. So in Spain we have Vox, which I'd put in a slightly different bucket than the Austrian party. I wouldn't say they're kind of updated Nazis, but they definitely are a hard right party. And then we had Geert Wilders, who just won in the Netherlands, which is kind of surprising, frankly. But the far right is on the march.
And the reaction of the centre in Brussels is fascinating as well, right? Because they are absolutely Leninist in their response to it. It's absolutely no compromise with the electorate. I mean, one of the things that we pointed out during the election, during the referendum, was that these crazy people have pushed free movement to such an extent that we can't even stop convicted child killers coming into the country, right? That's how insane it is. Like, even they have protected free movement rights, like people who've killed like 9-year-olds. And because Brussels just doubles down on this approach and just says we will not compromise about anything, it opens up all of these sorts of issues to be exploited, obviously by political entrepreneurs everywhere. And I think it can only get worse and worse.
It's funny. I'd love to compare and contrast the U.S. and the EU because I've lived in both countries, so to speak, considering the EU to be kind of a super state. And it's funny how the extremes of the parties are different. In the U.S., we talked about this in our chat, right? There is this sort of I wouldn't call it hard right because there isn't a traditional European style hard right. I think in the U.S. there is kind of like an anti-liberal. It's more of a LARP than a movement. But this whole post-liberalism thing, it's heavily some of it's infused by Catholicism, like Patrick Deneen, Adrian Vermeule, Sohrab Ahmari. This business of we should more closely couple religion and state. although the US is not a fundamentally Catholic country, so I think it's more of a fantasy than anything else. You have online characters like Curtis Yarvin, Bronze Age pervert, etc., who are obviously promulgating visions that are kind of beyond or outside of the liberal fold. But in Europe, you have like real hard right parties. Like I always thought as a European that like if the multiculturalism or the open borders policy got worse enough, you would see a rise of like real like I people will say that I'm being naive, but in the US, it's not a fundamentally fascist country. Like no one here is going to goose step to the great leader. Like it's just never going to happen. Like forget it. Like you're never going to get 50 states to be marching to one tune. Like it's not. But in Europe, I could see that happening again, right? And so it's in some sense it's much more dangerous in Europe than I think it is in the US. Just as a random compare and contrast.
I agree with that. Europe has you can just look at the history of this. Europe has really, really horrific demons, and you can see these demons alive now. If you go over to East Ukraine now, right? You go back to 1941, 1942, 1943. You had the Soviet Union retreat, and the Nazis move in. You had one set of people take over the torture chambers of the other set of people, and wading literally through basements of blood. And now you have in literally the exact same towns, you have the exact same situation with these villages changing hands and the torture chambers changing hands and the people wading through blood in the basements. And Europe has these terrible demons, and I think everyone should take it seriously. And the kind of Fukuyama idea that these things were all in the past because of 1989, 1991, the end of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union, I think is very dangerous to think like that.
Real quick, what's the easiest choice you can make? Taking the window instead of the middle seat, outsourcing business tasks that you absolutely hate. What about selling with Shopify? Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Whether you're selling security systems or marketing memory modules, Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. I've used it in the past at the companies I've founded, and when we launch merch here at Turpentine, Shopify will be our go-to. Shopify helps turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to other leading commerce platforms. And Shopify helps you sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. With Shopify Magic, whip up captivating content that converts, from blog posts to product descriptions. Generate instant FAQ answers. Pick the perfect email send time. Plus, Shopify Magic is free for every Shopify seller. Businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/momentofzen. Go to shopify.com/momentofzen now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/momentofzen.
Compliance doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, with VANTA, it can be super simple. Trusted by over 5,000 fast-growing companies like Chili Piper, Patch, Gusto, and Juniper, VANTA automates the pricey, time-consuming process of prepping for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more. With VANTA, you can save up to 400 hours and 85% of costs. VANTA scales with your business, helping you successfully enter new markets, land bigger deals, and earn customer loyalty. And bonus, our Moment of Zen listeners get $1,000 off VANTA. Just go to vanta.com/zen. That's VANTA.com/ZEN.